Hello and welcome to the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast. This morning, my name is Tom Luongo, and it's a great day to be alive because I've got with me today one of my favorite people, a guy I get to talk to every week graciously on Sputnik Radio with he and Lee Stranahan. It's my new best friend, Garland Nixon. And Garland's a great guy, and while he and I don't see eye to eye about everything. We see eye to eye on enough things from the different parts of the political spectrum. I thought it would be an interesting conversation for us to go ahead and kind of long form out what we normally do on Fault Lines in the 15-minute segment thing where the pressure's off a little bit. We just kind of hang out, be ourselves, let our receding hairlines down, and see where we can go from there. So, Garland, how are you this morning, man?
I'm fantastic. And yourself?
I breathe in, I breathe out, and I repeat as I need to. So I just try and keep it. I just try to, another day above the roses, as it were. So.
Yeah, same here. Especially now, it's a very difficult time we're in trying to figure things out. And it's frustrating because I'm sure like you, I have so many friends and people that I've known over the course of the years that have been and good people, honest people who have been so propagandized and so misled that it's hard to have political discussions with people who really aren't paying attention and aren't getting outside of that mainstream media spectrum of misinformation and propaganda.
It really is hard, and I'll tell you, man. I mean, I live in North Florida. I live north of Gainesville, and Gainesville is one of the few islands of hyper leftism in a sea of rednecks. And so I grew up I went to school here. I've grown up here. All of my friends, for all intents and purposes, all my friends are lefties. I haven't seen them since Trump was elected. Like, we had one or two get-togethers, and I haven't seen. And we've just we all have kids now and everything else, and so, but I don't. It's like we're not seeking each other out simply because we don't want to have that conversation anymore, and it's kind of distressing in a fundamental way. And I know that they're more, and some of them are more informed than others, but they're just so gaslit about the wrong things, and it's a very frustrating thing to see that continue to go on when it's so obvious that after years of kind of trying to counter program each other at a certain level. How just kind of retreated into ideological corners and no one wants to talk to each other anymore. It's kind of sad.
Yeah, I've noticed this, and as you've mentioned, I'm a lefty-leaning person, and I have a lot of friends. I'm in Maryland, a very blue state.
Right.
But here's what I've found lately, and that is, and I've been seeing this more and more. The Mueller report happened. 3 straight years I do radio in D.C., and I just said, this is a bunch of crap. You guys are being taken to the cleaners. And finally, the Mueller report comes out, and even though that was even garbage and propaganda, in my opinion, they had no choice but to say there's nothing here conspiracy-wise, collusion-wise, etc. But here's what I've noticed, and this is how effective propaganda is. I've had 2 people say to me in the last couple of weeks, people who are left-leaning people, who I'll talk about this, and they'll say, yeah, but I think there's something to Trump and the Russians. And there's something going on with him. And when I'll try to dig up, well, tell me, what is it? They don't know. And I'll eventually say to them, you believe something that's been proven to be false, and you don't even know why you believe it. That's the essence of propaganda. And I would say it's not your fault if you think about it. Somebody's been telling you something over and over and over and over. And what they know is the way the brain works, repetition creates new neural pathways. And whether or not you have any reason to believe it, if someone says it enough, your brain will start to associate it. So now we've got a bunch of people in this country running around saying, I believe X, and I don't even know why. And that's a sad state of affairs, because it's not just one thing. There's so much propaganda out there that's actually the default position of so many people, that they believe things, and when you ask them why, they have absolutely no clue. But I think you and I know why, because they've been effectively and intentionally propagandized by the intelligence community and the government.
I agree. It's the Goebbels thing. It's the big lie treatment. Tell a lie big enough, long enough, and often enough, and eventually people will believe it. And it's just programming. They believe that. I think they use the term. I think they really think that the term neuro-linguistic programming actually works. I both agree and disagree. I don't think it actually works as well as they think it does, but it does work well enough for the people who don't have enough time or inclination to care about wanting to change their opinion at this point, until it becomes important to them, they're not going to until it materially affects their life. And it becomes like it's like everything else. There are a lot of single issue voters out there, for example, right? And until the government intrudes on that particular issue in a way that they're uncomfortable with, they're going to be okay with the default position. Well, we kind of need government to do these things, and I don't mind having them build the roads because it would be better than the private sector doing it. And they don't know why they believe this stuff, but they believe it, and that's fine. And it's no point in changing their mind. But the minute you hit the minute the government tries to get in and hits them on that one issue that is they're incredibly passionate about, all of a sudden everything changes. And so we're just not at that point with a lot of people vis-a-vis Trump, and Trump has become that issue with them. The situation with Russiagate is that bad that they've created this like sense of insanity in a lot of people, and they want to believe that it's true because it's easier to believe that because everybody is so damn cynical. And everybody is rightly cynical that the government's corrupt. Well, Trump got to the top of the tower. He must be as corrupt as the rest of them. And, he is at a certain level, I fundamentally believe trivially corrupt, in the way that
Right.
everybody has to be corrupt to get a building built in New York City. So he's greased palms. He's backed aldermen. He's done this kind of thing. And that's just the way things work in getting buildings built in New York. It's just the way it is. And that kind of weak mafioso tactics they're trying to hang him with as president over pressuring Zelensky in Ukraine. And I'm like looking at this going, are you kidding me? Are you that naive, or are you just being willfully naive to think that, oh my God, he shouldn't act that way at all because come on. I mean, yesterday you were on the one hand, these same people who would be complaining that you can't trust anybody in government, or then outraged that Trump would try and shake Zelensky down over some foreign aid to go after Joe Biden. Like, that's somehow beyond the pale. I mean, even if that's all true, what I just said, which half of it isn't, are you really that naive, or you really want to be that outraged? I mean, I think you just willfully want to be outraged at that point. Frankly, I just don't think most of the centrist voters care. But
Yes, I think you're right. The people, the diehard, resistance believers, the Adam Schiff and his followers of the world, in their minds, actually believe that everybody is really concerned about that. But if you look at the numbers, particularly amongst independents, the support for impeachment is rapidly dropping.
Mhm.
And one of the examples, again, a friend of mine who's like a resistance person, so we don't talk politics much, but so they sat and watched the hearings for like 2 hours the other day. I get to my buddy's house. I get to his house. I walk in. Hey, what's happening? He looks at me and he says, this probably isn't really going to go anywhere, is it? And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of obvious what I've been telling you all along. You only have to
Right.
watch it. But I tell you what, the interesting thing about that, you ever, sometimes you'll watch something and maybe a book you read or a movie you saw, something that comes to mind. I don't know why, but this is what comes to mind in Ukraine Gate, because I look at it and I think, these are highly educated people. They're marching all these people across in front of Congress with PhDs and, postgraduate degrees, blah, blah, blah. So these are supposed to be intelligent people. But when I look at the so-called case that they have against Donald Trump, it is pathetic. I can't say it's weak, but because there's nothing that even exists that I could call weak. And I tell you what it reminds me of, a book I had about, the Nazis and things like that, about World War II, called The American Axis. And one thing they talked about, Lindbergh, prior to the start of World War II, he went to Germany and he got toured all around Germany. And afterwards he mentioned, yeah, they keep the trains running and they're good at a lot of stuff. But what Lindbergh said was, he was kind of shocked over, for all of their technological advances, when it came just to common sense, how manifestly stupid the Nazis were. That's kind of the way he put it. I just can't believe how stupid they are. Basically
Yeah.
saying they're crazy ideologues.
Right.
When I look at this Ukraine case, I think to myself, wait a minute. Anyone can look at this case and, like, a weekend, really a day in, you're looking at what they're putting up as a case, and you're like, they have nothing. How? And I just started thinking, how stupid could these people be to put
Right.
this forward? And that popped into my mind that when you get to these diehard ideologues like this, particularly government bureaucrat ideologues, their ideology manifests itself. It's so absurd. It manifests itself as stupidity, and you end up eventually scratching your head saying these people are morons. However, I take that to be a positive thing for this reason, because I believe that people like Garland Nixon and Tom Luongo and other people out there can easily figure them out and can easily communicate to the people out here. Take a look at these people. They have nothing. They're idiots, and you should not be following and supporting them in the first place.
You're right, and it's interesting. I mean, Jordan Peterson talks about ideological possession, right? And he's not the only one who talks about it, but he's just the first person to come into mind. I know that's the first person to use that phrase in my earshot. And I listen to, and Peterson's right when he talks about these things. And there's a lot of stuff going on in terms of left brain versus right brain programming and a variety of these things that are going on. And it's all being very cynically used by the intelligence agencies and by the media, which basically are the same thing. I don't know why I repeat myself like that.
Yeah.
But to create these false narratives and these false dyads. And this is a very classic thing that we do in American media. A friend of mine is very fond of reminding me all the time that, we create false dyads, this if not A, then B scenario with every issue. So if you hate education, then if you're against public education, then you hate children. That's a false dyad. If you're not a Republican, then you must be a Democrat. That's a false dyad, right? If you are against impeachment, you must love Donald Trump. Well, no, we're just against impeachment. And they create these false dyads everywhere throughout the media space so that, for example, there was a small dust up yesterday with Mike Pompeo, right? And and I don't know if you noticed this, but yesterday, like Pompeo resigned was trending on Twitter. This is yesterday. We're recording this on the Sunday before Thanksgiving, because there was a document released from the State Department proving that Nunes and the White House and Giuliani and Pompeo all knew that that Giuliani was doing this investigation into Ukraine. Like, we already knew that Giuliani was doing an end-run investigation around Ukraine, and everybody knew that Pompeo knew. Come on, and that they weren't going to, and that he wasn't going to protect his people. Like, that's evidence somehow that he's a bad boss. Like, that's the best they've got on Pompeo. I mean, I don't like Mike Pompeo. I don't want to be our Secretary of State. But you look at this stuff and you say, really, this is how crazy you are? This is how ideologically possessed you are, that you think this is some kind of bombshell when this is just something we've already known? And that if Pompeo was truly corrupt, he wouldn't have let it out the door, like at the first request by some random NGO that's out there. Are you kidding me? Really? You believe this stuff? Are you that unsophisticated? Well, I guess you are. And I guess you want to be that unsophisticated in my mind. But that's fine. We'll keep plugging away at it and keep trying to sophisticate you in your understanding of it. So.
Well, the term you use there is something that I like to comment on anyway, and that is bombshell. The news has become, I mean, in the last 3 years, the most commonly heard phrases on CNN and MSNBC are bombshell or the walls are closing in, something to indicate that this is the big one. Oh, the other shoe is about to drop. Constantly, they manufacture their outrage, and I think one of the things they're doing, and I mean physically, is they're creating a horde of dopamine addicts.
Mm-hmm.
These people,
Yeah.
a mindless, a mob of dopamine addicts who are waiting the next day, who are like, I hate Trump, I hate Trump. Can I have my fix today? I just need somebody to scream bombshell. I don't even need to know what it's about. I don't even care. All I know is every time they say bombshell, the walls are closing in, I can jump up and clap. I was like, I'm in D.C., K Street, around the corner from the White House. And I was like standing in a building waiting for the elevator. And these two women are standing there talking, and they're talking, basically doing the usual. Well, they have him this time. Trump's going down this time. And I'm looking at the news, and it's pure lies.
Right.
There's a CNN pundit propagandist up there talking how this guy, Ambassador Sondland, has put the nail in the coffin for Trump, and he's the quid pro quo and extortion and bribery. This guy's done it all. then I go back and I look at this guy's testimony, and it's the opposite.
It's the
And
exact
the guy
opposite. Yeah.
said, "Nah, it was just presumption. I don't really have anything on Trump. I got no evidence whatsoever." And
Right.
and you realize that's why people are where they are. People are not going to take the time to look it up. And in their defense, they're working the class people. They don't, they're going to
Right.
work, feeding their families. They don't have time, but they're going to scream out every day. This is the big one. And then eventually, at some point, just like Russiagate, it gets to a point where the rubber meets the road, and they got to make their excuses why, you know, 3 years of saying Trump is going to go isn't happening. And
Hmm.
but sadly, the dopamine addicts, they just slump into the corner for a while, knowing that within another month or so, there'll be a new dopamine rush. There'll be a new Russiagate or Ukraine Gate or something, and they'll bite right back on the hook and get dragged over the gunnel and thrown in the cooler like the other fish.
Yeah, well, that'll happen, but that pile of people is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller because at a certain point, exhaustion sets in and you burn out your adrenals.
Yeah,
I
and
mean, and then at that point, like everything else, you have to have a bigger and bigger hit in order to get the same effect, and eventually your adrenals burn out. I know I live that life every once in a while. Whenever I'm under the gun, under the gun. I'm like, I need to write or die for the next 18 months. Okay, and then at the end of it, you're like, oh, my adrenals are shot. No more coffee. I need to, and that's happening, and unfortunately, that's kind of happening with Brexit, right? That
yeah.
exhaustion over Brexit and how they've manipulated people is how they've gotten to a state where it looks like Boris Johnson's going to be able to win an easy majority to pass that terrible treaty. And people are okay with it because they just want this over and done with, and they just want to get on with their lives. And whatever, we'll fix it. And it's almost like a majority of Brits at this point are like, okay, we'll just fix it in post,
Right,
and
right.
that's that. So
Yeah, and sadly, they're going to get had. Um,
yeah,
and I think what we're looking at here is also to put a positive. I don't even want to say well, I'll just say it, a positive spin on things,
mhm.
because these are our opinions, and that is what we're doing right now. I think makes the difference. The Tom Luongos of the world, and Garland Nixons, and all the people, the Ron Paul Institutes, and the Jimmy Dores, all the people now who are, I'm not going to even use the word left or right anymore. The
Mhm.
anti-elitist people like me, Tom, people like when I grew up, my father was a longshoreman. He put on a hard hat. He went to the docks when it was blistering cold, and he went there when it was scorching hot, and he unloaded ships, and he made a living to feed his family. And people who saw that and have a concept of people, the everyday person who works for a living and earns their keep, right? And these people, a lot of these type of people like a Garland Nixon are coming together saying, I don't want to hear about this left right ideology crap. I know what I see, and that is the everyday person is getting screwed,
Yep.
and there's nothing but corruption, and we now have a government that doesn't represent that guy in the hard hat who I grew up as a little kid respecting because he walked out the door in the colder heat. And so people like us have gotten away from, I've got to be mad at Tom Luongo because we don't have the same exact ideology. I've got to be mad at this other person because they're a conservative or this person's a liberal,
Nope.
to saying we can see you now.
Yeah,
It's
no,
very,
it's
very
absolutely.
obvious.
It's very funny, Garland, going all the way back to 9/11, right? I go all the way back to 9/11, being a libertarian, being a hardcore libertarian. I can tell you that I'm always everybody's asshole, right? No matter what happens here, it's always the libertarian's fault. I'm dead serious. It doesn't
Oh
matter.
yeah.
And going back to 9/11, I remember when the anti-war movement in this country collapsed, and it was pretty much the Mises Institute and Justin Raimondo over at antiwar.com. That was pretty much it, right? And if you weren't associated, I mean, because the left's the anti-war movement on the left completely collapsed. I know. I was doing
Yep.
local politics at the time in leftist Gainesville, and they were all kind of cheering the Patriot Act on to a greater or lesser extent. It was kind of scary, and but I remember then both Raimondo and Lou Rockwell and others saying we have more in common with the disaffected anti-war left who are disorganized now than we ever had with the Republicans. And we need to stop looking at ourselves in terms of a left-right thing. And we need to be looking at who is our tactical and strategic partner at this moment in time on the issues that we need to be aligned with. So we can be aligned with the Republicans when they're talking about lower taxes, and we can be aligned with the people on the left when they're talking about civil rights, and we can be even aligned with environmentalists when they're talking about pollution and not global warming. Because even back then for the most part, we were skeptics about global warming, but about pollution and about not properly, about government intervening in the marketplace to deprecate the value of pollution control to zero so that people just dump their waste everywhere. I've learned more about environmental protection from libertarians than I have ever learned from Greens. Okay, because they actually tell me what happened. Like I've learned more about what happened with Love Canal and the Cleveland River starting on fire back in the 70s and all of that stuff and the massive amounts of pollution and the whys and the wherefores of that. But communicating that stuff on both sides of the political aisle and say, look, we don't disagree about the problems that we're seeing. We all see the same problems. We can disagree upon implementation of how to solutions. We can argue about the order of operations, about what we need to clean up first. That's what we should be having healthy discussions about and healthy disagreements about until we figure out, okay, what's the right thing to do first? Because I may not know. We all, again, see the same problems, but I'm a smart guy, but I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I don't know that we need to clean up this versus that first. I know that probably foreign policy is where you start, and that's where anti-war and the Mises Institute have always led, saying it's foreign policy first and then everything else second, which is why I support Tulsi Gabbard for the Democratic nomination, even though I'm not sure I'd vote for her for president, but I certainly would vote for her, as a voter to have her represent half the quote unquote half the country, because I think she's absolutely right on that thing, and she's a progressive. And she and I disagree about everything. I sit down with Tulsi Gabbard, talk to her about guns. I'm sure that we'd have a heated old time, and that her Buddha-like smile would fall from her face a couple of times. But that's fine. That's fair. That's what we're supposed to do. But I'd still vote for her, and I'd still give her money because I think she's doing great work on identifying what I think are the most important issues, and that's where the political discussion should always be, and it should always be a healthy discussion. And unfortunately, we're not in that.
Well, and I think one of the things going on here is, you got to figure out what your problems are. Okay, so we may disagree on some things, and there's time for that, but we can't even get there if we don't have democracy. And globalism, in my opinion, is here's the way I look at it. Globalism is kind of their semi-economic way of doing things, and then the neocon would be their war, their foreign policy of how they get there, which is take whatever they want wherever they want, and still making plenty of money, making plenty of money like that.
It's all just corporatism. Yeah, it's all just vile corporatism of various forms.
Right, but I think Tulsi Gabbard, in my opinion, I'm going to say this, is one of the most important. Forget everything about her. Her anti-war message is one of the most, well, I'll put it this way, the most important message that I have heard from a presidential candidate probably in my lifetime. I can't think of anything, and not just because of what she's saying, but when she's saying it. We have gotten to a point where we don't have a democracy or anything close to it. Republic, democracy, any words that imply that the government is acting on behalf of its constituents are not applicable right now.
No.
And that can't possibly happen. We can't possibly get there until we address this foreign policy, because we're just going around the world spending money. We'll say we gave money to Egypt. We don't give money to Egypt. We take several $1 billion and we hand it to Lockheed Martin and Raytheon, and we tell them, go ahead and send those missiles to Egypt, and we'll say gave Egypt some money. We gave it to the military-industrial complex, and then we just gave some weapons over there. And oftentimes, here's what I've been finding out lately: we buy X amount of hundred millions of dollars of missiles and things like that. In this instance, Javelin missiles, which are anti-tank missiles, we send them to Ukraine, where there hasn't been a tank battle since 2015, a corrupt country. The corrupt people, oligarchs in Ukraine, then simply resell that stuff on the international black market at up to 5 times the normal value. So we're buying stuff, giving it to a bunch of crooks who then sell it on the black market
Yep.
and keep the money, and the American people pay for it. How can we have democracy when that's what we're doing and our government knows that's what's happening and they don't care because they're filling their crony friends' pockets with money, and I'm pretty sure their own pockets are getting greased pretty
Well, of
well there.
course they are. Of course they are. How is it all of a sudden? Why is nobody asking the question about how five prominent Republicans and Democrats all have children on the boards of Ukrainian gas companies? Right? John Kerry, Nancy Pelosi, Mitt Romney, Joe Biden, and there's one other I think I can't remember off the top of my head. Like they all have children sitting on the boards of Ukrainian gas companies, all of whom were reselling the same Russian gas that was piped through Ukraine that Poroshenko said, oh, we're not going to ever buy any more gas from Russia. Well, that gas went through Ukraine. They collected the transit fee. They sent it to Poland, who then nominally sent it to Poland. It never went to Poland, but it went to the Polish company and then sells it back to the Ukrainian company at 3 times the price. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian people are freezing to death, and they're having to close schools because they can't get enough freaking gas to run the schools and to open the schools in the middle of the Ukrainian winter. I mean, this is the kind of thing we're talking about here, and somehow this isn't a failed state, and somehow this is foreign policy. See, I said a long time ago, foreign policy is just war by other means. Okay, and it's a very, very sad state of affairs that we as the American people have our wealth extracted from us at gunpoint. This is the libertarian in me. They extract our wealth, our time, our labor at gunpoint. And whatever they can't get out of us, they just print out of thin air and then raise all of our domestic prices for. And then complain to us that we're not competitive on the open market. Then tell us that we're not competitive on the open market and China's the bad guy. Like, no, we're the bad guy at every level. But they extract our money from at gunpoint, in order to buy those weapons from Raytheon, who then sell them to Ukrainian oligarchs, who then turn around and sell them on the black market. And oh, by the way, if you don't think that half of those Ukrainian oligarchs work for the CIA, which they then turn around and use to destabilize to fund the MEK in Iran, for Christ, for example, or ISIS in Syria or Iraq, you're out of your mind, because that's what's happening. And it's all you. It's all me. We all do it. We all said we all. Do you pay your taxes, Garland?
Yes,
I
I
pay
do.
mine. Damn right.
Yep.
You know why I pay my taxes? Because I don't want anybody showing up to my door and taking my daughter away from me and remanding my ass to Guantanamo.
Exactly. So, well, here's the thing too with the Ukraine, and this is something that happened. And I believe the big deal here, two things. Number one, what Ukraine is really about is prior to, and again, I'm not a Trump supporter. And here's what happens. And I think there are a lot of people like me, you and I. I'm not a Trump supporter, but I support justice. I believe there should be a process, a legal process. Everybody deserves due process. I don't have to like Donald Trump to believe that he deserves a fair trial, that he deserves a fair process, and I don't have to support his policies or not support his policies to say we deserve a fair process. What Donald Trump did, in my opinion, is the one thing you can't do. He exposed the truth about the regime change game. And that is, we say this crap about democracy or whatever lie we're going to use. We go in, but after we go in quietly under the table, the Joe Bidens and Pelosi's and Romneys of the world and McCain's of the world, they send in their proxies. It may be their children. It may be their business partners, whatever. After we destabilize a country, they go in and pick the bones like vultures.
Mm-hmm.
And what Donald Trump exposed that, and they cannot afford for investigative journalists to start looking into it and say, wait a minute, look at the numbers of people, because they won't just find it with the Ukraine. They will find it with Ukraine. They'll find it with every single government. And the other side of it is, once they took control of that government illegally, the Obama administration's people went in there and they used the Ukrainian government as a proxy to interfere with the 2016 election and to stop Donald Trump. And that's the reality. And they're doing any and everything they can, also with their proxies in the media, to hide the reality of that. And that's why this Ukraine gate is so absurd, because it reflects desperation. They had no choice from their perspective. The people are about to see, we're about to be unmasked. If we allow these people to look into Ukraine, they will find not only what's going on in Ukraine, but they'll start scratching their heads looking at Syria and Libya and Venezuela and say, whoa, is this the game? So
Yeah.
Donald Trump, even though I'm not a Trump supporter, in a way, I think the phenomenon of Donald Trump has been great for America, in that the phenomenon of Donald Trump has some exposed some things that would never ever be exposed, because Donald Trump is not wise enough to know you're supposed to keep this stuff quiet, and he's not a part of that particular group of the elite who are on the inside with that. He's outside of that, so he'll just say anything. And I believe, I'll end up by saying this. I believe, and this is pretty horrifying, that the Intel community, and you've probably heard me say this before, has decided Donald Trump will not be president in 2020, no matter
Mhm.
what they have to do, and that they will present us with the equivalent of Hillary Clinton in a Republican outfit and Hillary Clinton in a Democratic outfit, and so we can choose which Hillary Clinton we want. That
Yep.
they have decided there ain't no more democracy here. We'll give you two Hillary Clintons of some fashion, and you can choose, Jeb. Who will it be? Jeb Bush or Joe Biden?
Right. Well, that was the 2016 choice that we were supposed to get, which was nobody or Hillary Clinton, so that she could be coronated. I will take exception, but the only thing I loved all of what you just said. I will take the only exception I will take here is I will lay this idea in your head, which is, and you can dismiss it if you want, and then maybe it's rose-colored glasses on my part, but part of me actually believes that I think Donald Trump is not. I don't think he's naive or stupid or anything. I think he purposefully went into this presidency with his eyes open about what he was going to change. And I think he knew from the beginning that he was going to get some pushback. And I remember him saying right after he took office, saying, I knew it was bad. I didn't know it was this bad. Right. He's like, and I think he's been learning on the job just how bad it is. And I think that describes, and I wouldn't say excuses, but it makes it makes sense as to why he's floundered so much throughout the early part of his presidency. And I always said, and the only reason I voted for him in the end was that I knew that him becoming president was so anathema to them that it would create the very craziness that we've seen. And that would expose, and then they would effectively expose themselves while he just stood there and said, "No, I'm not guilty of this." And he's too much of an asshole to back down. Pat Buchanan had Trump pegged at the beginning of this. He said, Trump is not like Nixon. Because remember, Buchanan worked for Nixon. He knew Nixon well. Nixon resigned in his own way, Nixon resigned for the good of the country and to protect the presidency. You can agree with that or you can disagree with that, but that was what was going through Nixon's mind. Trump and his narcissism and all of that is like, nah, you're not getting me for Joe Biden's crimes. Like, I got into this game because of Joe Biden's crimes. Because I know what they all are, because I've seen them all. So I'm not giving that to you. You're going to have to take me out of here kicking and screaming, and in the process, I'm going to out all of you in the process. And just him being recalcitrant and contrary puts him in the position to force them completely out in the open, which is exactly what Nigel Farage has done in Britain. It's exactly what Matteo Salvini is doing in Italy. It's exactly what, and to a greater or lesser extent, the Gilets jaunes are doing in France. And that comes from, and all of these men are only able to do these things because we can see them now. And like it or not, democracy still works well enough that they're still scared enough that they do not want to lose the final veneer of, well, you still have a choice. They don't want that to go away just yet because they know that we won't stand for it because they haven't gotten rid of the Second Amendment yet.
Right, exactly.
And
exactly.
So, I don't want to go that. I don't want to go there. I've been saying for a long time now. I'm like, the more they do this, the more they out themselves, the more they play these reindeer games, the longer I go guillotines.
Right.
Right.
Well, they're pushing themselves. The thing about it is, they're pushing people towards that. They're pushing people towards the point of feeling desperation. Normally, I'm not one that I'm afraid or concerned. I'm like, things are going to work out, one
Right.
way or the other, blah, blah, blah. When I look at it, I'm not going to use the word afraid because I never like to live in fear of anything.
Right.
I'll
Right.
say this. I am concerned that the 2020 election, because I think these bastards have decided, this concept of democracy is done. We're not even going to pretend that it's democracy if we have to. Do what we need to do to stop Trump, or on the other side, if let's say Tulsi Gabbard, forget a name, because people will, if it's someone that is not going to go along with their foreign policy, I think their desperation, they've decided to come out of the shadows and to say to the world, yes, we're the guys in the black suits and we really do run this country. And, we've had enough. We're taking over in the open. Because, see, here's the way I look at it.
Hmm.
Garland Nixon, Tom Luongo, people like us who believe in a democracy, in a republic, whatever you want to call it, we believe, look, I'm fine with, if I'm running against Tom Luongo, I'm fine with getting on stage and telling all the people I want, whatever it is, Medicare for all, blah, blah, blah. And I'm fine with Tom Luongo getting on stage afterwards and saying, vote for me because that's a bunch of crap and this is why. And
Hmm.
letting the people vote. And afterwards we can shake hands and I can say, well, Tom, hey, I made a good go at you won, or you can say you won, and then we can say, but 4 years from now, let me tell you, I'm coming back and we're going to have more.
Right.
And trying to use the mechanisms of democracy to actually honestly convince people, and people who, Garland and Tom really believe that if we convince people of our positions, they'll vote our way. But we can live with a democracy in which sometimes you're going to win, sometimes you're going to lose.
That's right.
These people they don't believe in losing. They don't
Nope.
believe in the rules. They will do anything they have to do. And I mean anything. And Julian Assange is a perfect example. They are
Yep.
literally killing that man in front of our eyes
Hmm.
because he would expose their work, their crimes, and he would
More.
expose the elites for who they are.
Moreover, they're killing him in front of our eyes as it's not just as an example. This is what we can and will do to you. We won't even kill you quickly. We'll kill you slowly. We'll torture you in public. Here's the thing, Garland. You're right. Right. We should always have that democracy only works on the basis of losers' consent. Nigel Farage says this all the time. If you're not willing to accept the loss, then we don't have a functioning political system. The anarchist libertarian sitting behind this microphone says, what took you so long? Like, they'll never, ever figure the whole system itself is designed to leave you with a false choice. Moreover, that it can't help but eventually corrupt itself over time. I don't I don't read a lot of political tracts anymore because I don't have time, and two, I don't care. And frankly, three, I don't feel I need to. I just keep reminding myself that chapter 10 of The Road to Serfdom by Hayek is a really powerful piece. If you don't read the rest of The Road to Serfdom and you only read chapter 10 entitled Why the Worst Get on Top, okay, then if you read that, it's 20 pages, it's or 15 pages, it's Hayek, it's really dry, but read it because it describes the process, the mechanism by which government will always corrupt itself over time, no matter the form of government. So every cycle, it has to be torn down and rebuilt in a new form. It's the old story. It doesn't matter. It's the oldest story in the world. It's the story of institutional breakdown and disorder and all that stuff. I've been banging on the subject in my live streams for months, about why it's important that we retain the real stories and how they're being lost at times in all of this political hoo-ha. When I sit here and I say all those things and I say, yeah, and that's why I'm an anarchist, but I'm a realist as well, which is to say, philosophically, I'm an anarchist because that's the only position I can defend. Okay. But in reality, I'm more than happy to work with people and work through the process and understand that we should build a society strong enough that we don't need forcible government. Now the Marxists will make that same argument, of course, the doctrinaire ones, but we disagree with how to get there, right? It's always about specification versus implementation. And we always purposefully in the political sphere and the political communications always purposefully conflate those two in order to get people angry. Okay, so it goes back to what I said earlier about if you don't like public education, then you hate children. right? It's to conflate the problem with the implementation, and you have to always separate those two things out. You always have to compartmentalize them, so then you can discuss rationally what the implementation should be, what the order of operations should be. Because I'll tell you flat out, like I look at the healthcare system, for example. I know that you're on that side of the healthcare debate, the opposite side of the healthcare debate for me. And what I'll tell you is this: I look at what's happened in healthcare over the last 50 years, and I say it's very simple. Governments wanted control over it, but they've had to do it in such they can't do it in such a way that they just take control of it, because if they do that, people will rebel against it. So what they have to do is make the healthcare system so freaking bad that people will look at government healthcare as, well, that's just far better than what we have now, which is exactly the situation. And I actually had that argument made to me by my very good friend and who is, who's in medical IT, who's done this stuff, and he's like, yeah, and he's a hardcore conservative, not libertarian. And he's like, yeah, at this point, this current system is so bad that I would take Medicare for everybody, because Medicare is a better system than what we currently have. But understand that was the design, to invalidate private healthcare as an option. And it was a 2-generation destruction of our healthcare system on purpose. That's the way I see it. Whereas private production of healthcare and of insurance and the insurance industry is another argument, is the same argument again, because they've destroyed the ability to assess risk because of central banking and the money and the this and that and all of these things. And so again, it's like, what do we do at this point in time? So as libertarians, do we go with, as a temporary thing, let's do Medicare for all, because that would be better than what we currently have, and that would do as little harm as possible. We do take our libertarian Hippocratic oath, right? I mean, these are all the things that go through your mind when you're trying to put all this stuff together and say, yeah, I'm a realist and I want to work with people from the other side of the political divide, but I need to educate them about what the real causes and the real problems are before we actually sit down to have an implementation discussion.
Right.
That's not ideologically biased.
Yep. And the other side of that is, and here's the problem, and here's what really brings people like us together, and that is, how we resolve some of these issues, to me, has to be kind of viewed through the context of where we are, right? So you and I and the people who would feel the pain of some of these things if they don't work out right, we can discuss these things, and we can have 99% of American voters can say, you know what, we've agreed, we want to go with X. The problem, I think, that brings us together is we already know that 99% of the voters can come up with, we want to go with X. But when it gets up to Capitol Hill, there is no chance that we're going to, if 99% of Americans agree with it, we probably are not going to get it.
Oh, absolutely not.
That the problem is we don't have a mechanism in which the people can have a valid discussion about the policies because of the corruption of the media, can become even informed voters or informed citizens when it comes to politics, because we have a media that deliberately, intentionally misleads us. So to have a country that has a representative government requires informed voters and an informed electorate, and we now have a system that deliberately misinforms the electorate.
Absolutely.
So the problem is the baseline of where we need to be is being corrupted because people are being told, just like, as again, I get back to Ukraine Gate. I watched this Ambassador Sondland come on and say, I got nothing. This is all based on presumptions. I have no evidence. And then I go to see CNN, and the headline is Ambassador Sondland, bombshell. He's finally fingered Trump. He's pointed it out that Trump did. And I'm like, okay, so then how can you have an informed electorate when these people are deliberately misinforming the electorate? And that we can't even get to the kind of discussions that Tom and Garland would have about how to resolve our issues because they're not listening to Tom and Garland.
And worse than that, Tom and Garland are spending all their time just having to describe how badly the information that their people are being filled with is, so that then we'll never get to the discussion of how we fix healthcare. I mean, think about what we're actually feeding the beast by having this discussion this way. Because what are we doing? All we're doing is describing their reality back to and trying to just destroy narratives. We spend so much time playing whack-a-mole trying to kill their false narratives and their false dyads that we never actually get to. Oh, by the way, there's a better solution to all this. And it's fun in some ways, Garland. It was funny on Wednesday, last week. I don't know if I mentioned this when I was on Fault Lines with you guys earlier in the week, but on Tuesday, I had a real bad day on Tuesday, right? Normally, I never have any problem finding something to write about. It's like, I just throw a dart at the wall. I can write about that today, right? Tuesday, I sat there all day. I had the entire day, and I'm like, I've got work to do. I've got stuff I've got to get done. I've got all these deadlines before the end of the week because I've got this due on Thursdays, these due on Fridays, blah, 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 blah. I've got all this stuff I've got to do now. So Tuesday's my one day, like, I really can get something done. I spend all day staring at my laptop, I moved from computer to computer to computer around the house, not getting anything done. And somewhere around 6, 7 o'clock, I just turned to my wife, Camille, and I said, Camille, I am so freaking angry. I don't want to write about any of this, but it all ticks me off because I couldn't figure out what it was. I think I just finally hit on it, which is that I'm not writing about solving anything at this point. I'm killing the narrative. And like, that's exhausting. Like, and I said to Camille, could they just stop being them for half an hour so that we can just catch our breath and go, let us digest the 27 lies you just put out in the last 24-hour news cycle. Can you not put out the 28th one? Do I not have to listen to yet more garbage about how this is that what's happening in Iran is organic? Or I pick one, Lebanon, Iraq, any of these things. None of it's organic. Some of it is, a portion of it is organic. Like certainly like Hong Kong, it's a portion of it is organic, but not now. Now it's just a random bunch of student thugs being paid to go out and set people on fire for trying to remove roadblocks that they put in place because they've been told bring the city to its knees. I mean, like the government creates the Joker and a bunch of Joker clones to run around, and then we're not. Somehow that's pro-democracy.
Well, last night, funny thing, and this is odd enough. So last night I was going to a couple different parties in D.C. with a friend, and finally I said, let's go to the Trump Hotel. And my friend, who is a real hardcore lefty, was like, what? The Trump? I'm like, I never been there. I want to go to the Trump Hotel. So it was like, okay, so we go to because I'm like, I want to see what it's like. And I go in the Trump Hotel. So anyway, we're sitting there, and this is interesting. And my friend's like, so what about, they asked me something about Russiagate or whatever, something about what I thought about Russia in the election. And I kind of froze for a second. I just sat there and looked at my friend, and I'm kind of freezing, and I'm like, And it was like, I didn't know where to start. Right. It was like people are so misled, people are so gaslit that I immediately thought to myself, well, it felt like this. I've got somebody asking me about, I don't know, algebra 2, but they don't even know simple addition and subtraction. Right. And finally, I got to a point where I was like, we don't have that kind of time. We're sitting here, we're having drinks, we're in the Trump, we're looking over at the people, doing whatever they're doing, right? We're having a blast. We're laughing about, there's a guy behind me who looks like a rich guy who's 70 years old, and he's got this beautiful woman in her 20s, and we're like, okay, she's probably a call girl. We're having all these fun talks, right? And when this question was asked, I'm like, I don't know where to start. That's where I think that's kind of what you're saying, isn't it? The people are so misled, so gaslit. There's so much propaganda that where do you start when a person looks at you and just says, well, I think Trump was involved with the Russians, but I'm not really sure how. I just wanted to, jump over the rail into the fountain at that point. It's like, how do I survive this? I just changed the conversation and went back to, talking about other things.
Right. Well, it was interesting for me, right, being where I am now and being acutely aware of what happens when I write a new article, right, which is that it gets propagated all across what I like to call crank space, from zero hedge and points east, as it were. And I say to myself, if I write something, I can't even write little stuff anymore. I can't write blurbs or short pieces. Just saying, hey, oh, by the way, this link is interesting, and 150 words worth of commentary or snark or whatever. I can't do that. I have to sit down, write a piece because it's going to wind up on zero hedge, and if it's going to wind up on zero hedge, it's going to be seen by 50,000 people or then propagated to 250,000 people. It should be good, right? So there's that pressure of always having to figure out what's the next thing to write about, and of course at the same time, given where I am, I have to be thinking ahead as to what's coming next. And when you have this many things happening, where I've said this before, I'm like, I wrote an article about Trump a couple of months ago about Freaky Friday, right? Like every Friday, Trump would come out and like goose the stock markets. It just became very obvious after a while that that's what he was doing. He was coming out on a Friday morning and he was goosing the stock markets to ensure that there was a good close on Friday, something about China trade talks or this or that or whatever it was. And I'm like, and I've got an article due for Money in Markets every Friday morning. Like, so I got to sit down on Thursday, and usually I take my daughter to Taekwondo, and like while she's at Taekwondo, I go to McDonald's, pound out an article, or at least the beginnings of it, and finish Friday morning and send it in early so they can get out, early in the news cycle for Friday. I'm like, I'm loath to write anything on Thursday anymore, because by Friday it's going to be old, and it's going to look obsolete, and I'm going to have to write it over again. Like, and I believe in the patent. I'm like Patton. I don't like to cover the same real estate twice.
Right.
I'm like, and dude, it becomes almost impossible to do that, and then to keep up with everything, and just to try and I'm absorbing yesterday's news, and there was too much. So now I'm trying to incorporate yesterday's news plus today's news in order to write the next thing, and you find yourself having to write about glittering generalities anymore, as opposed to getting into the details on anything, because the details are changing so quickly, and most of them are lies in the first place. Like, it's crazy. Yeah. It's insanely nuts to try and stay up with any of that and then still look, like you're on top of any of it. And then there's the other side of it. It's like, you're only human. Your adrenals burn out just to bring this whole thing right back around again. Like, no, I need to check out for the afternoon.
Yeah. Well, the other thing about this, when you talk about writing, and I think this is something that's important for us to touch on, I'm looking around and I see lately that you see what's happening with Assange. And there, as you said, it's a slow, torturous death and in front of everyone, which is intentional. They're doing the Saudi Arabia crucify someone in the public square deal, hang them in the public square. And that's what they're doing with Julian Assange. But then I see, recently Max Blumenthal, who is, a pain in the neck for them on so many levels because, he is Jewish and he does report on some unpleasant things that Israel is doing, so they can't just call him an anti-Semite, so they hate him. So, but now they're going to his house. And we see what happened with Roger Stone, with Paul Manafort. We see Blumenthal. We see recently Medea Benjamin. What we're seeing now is the government is really, they're getting scared, and they're starting to do physical assaults now on the people who are attempting to expose them. Now they're going to, to me, it's scary because I'm not going to say scary. It's concerning, because they've taken it to another level. Because the Garland Nixon and the Tom Luongos, in my mind, here's what I'm saying. I know what I do. I know that I'm not going along with what they say. I'm going to assume that everything I have is tapped, that everything I have is being watched, and that everything I have is that they're lurking around the corner at any minute saying, oh, we're looking at Garland's texts and his emails. Is there something there we could use to blackmail him? Is there something we can use to attack him or arrest him or call him some kind of a, seditious espionage spy? It's like, literally, I truly, and I'm not a frightened person. I'm not a paranoid person. I was a cop for 27 years, But
hold on. I grew up with a cop. You are paranoid, right?
Well, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean people aren't really out to get you.
Exactly.
But now we're at a point where, like, the people, I look at everyone who's involved in just simple, honest journalism and reporting, and I'm like, there could be a time when people like us could literally disappear, could literally, they can use the IRS, they can use any number of weapons to come after us. And as desperate as they are, if it gets worse for them, I fear it's going to get worse for us, because now our civil liberties, well, as George Carlin said long ago, they ain't rights anymore. I don't know if they ever were. They're just privileges. And at any given time, those privileges can be revoked. And so what's really getting scary is we're getting in a situation where I don't know if we're going to get to a level where they grab a Garland Nixon and a Lee Stranahan and a Tom Luongo and say, you guys are going to jail.
I've thought about it in multiple different ways and thought about it, and it's like, and part of it, I mean, I don't know, Garland, I got sent back. I just was able to tell people it's finally happened. I've been getting recruited back. I used to work for Newsmax a few years ago, and I just got recruited back for them to take over one of their newsletters. And we can finally, they've been recruiting me for a couple of months now. We finally can say it out in the open. But I'm like, at this point, like, yeah, they can come, like working for Newsmax, that's good cover for me. I mean, in some ways. And I'm happy about that because, I know that that organization is close to the administration at a certain level. So, it doesn't, I'm not looking at it from that perspective. I didn't choose. That was not like a tertiary or quaternary thing. I think about it and I'm like, that's an interesting side effect. But I've considered this. And from the moment they started going after and deplatforming Alex Jones, I said to everybody from the beginning, I've said to everybody behind the scenes, I said, this ends with an offshore crypto bank that does. We all have an offshore crypto bank accounts where we can do offshore dollar transfers in order to pay our bills. It ends there, where we're all going to be driven underground, taking crypto payments on the sly, with QR codes and nothing. That's just what's going to happen. They're going to deplatform us to the point where we're not going to be able to function. The good news is, we will be able to function. But the good news is that they will just create the entire infrastructure for that to happen. And the dangerous period will be while the infrastructure is being built, which is where we are right now. Right. And the technology was, I'm not really following it very closely. I just know people and incentives, and I just know the people in that space to know that they're even more paranoid than I am, which means that which means I don't have to worry about it. I know they got my back at some point. That's, at some point the whole system will be built. There'll be an entire parallel internet and parallel banking system, and they will have secured ways of getting dollars for those of us who need to pay our electric bills or whatever, because there's the other side of it, and it's something that we talk about, not a lot with my patrons, but we do talk about it, and we do consider it. It's always in the back of our minds, which is where we're going to go when it all falls apart.
Right. Well, there are a lot of articles. The first one I think I might have saw was actually on Zero Hedge, and then I saw a couple other people. I think Michael Tracy, I believe, did something on it. But December 10th. YouTube supposedly they're going to say they're saying now we can delete any account that is not commercially viable.
Yep.
Now, and here's the thing. So what they do is this: you put out videos, and they decide that your video can't make money. They decide that your video, that people, that your video is not going to be allowed to have commercials, and then they say, oh, by the way, your videos aren't making money. Well, they'd be making a fortune if they would allow them to. So they stop them from making money, and now they're saying December 10th, they're out of here. I suspect that exactly what you're saying is right, and December 10th we will see some kind of an earth-shattering decision that they've made, because they've been exposed time and again, and now I think they're like, you know what? Let's make our move once and for all. All of these people on here that are going against the system, they got to be stopped. And it wouldn't surprise me if, like, a lot of my favorite shows, if not all of them on YouTube, I think, the Jimmy Dores of the world, the Ron Pauls of the world, the people who really shake their fists and rail at the system. I don't know what's going to happen on December 10th, but I don't think it's going to be good. And I think it's the beginning, if not the end of what you're putting forward.
Yeah, no, I agree, and it's been funny for the last couple of months now. This has been coming, and I do live streams twice a week, and for my subscribers, it's not a big audience. I don't have a huge YouTube channel. It's only about 3,000. I have about 3,000 followers on YouTube, and about 100 people, on my live streams, and I don't do anything else. But then I don't care. I don't care whether the thing grows or not. I've been very vocal to say, look, I've never monetized the channel. I've never signed up for AdWords or anything along those lines. I thought about it, tried to get it, whatever. And the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, I don't really want to. I'd rather monetize the channel in other ways, and I'd rather use YouTube as a bandwidth pig. I don't need them. I don't need to open up. I mean, people have been saying, my regulars are like, Tom, we'd like to be able to donate to the channel. Why don't you open up super chats? Why isn't this? I'm like, because Google takes 30% of your money. To host exactly the same level of content that they hosted before for nothing. So why should I give them 30% of your revenue? Like, you guys can just donate through Brave, or you can just donate through PayPal, or you can give me a little bit of crypto on the side, and the links are all down below. And if you feel that strongly, please do so, and I'd be appreciative if you do. But I'm gonna not do that. I'm going to get YouTube back to where it was before this became an issue, which is and a ridiculous and now biased advertising platform. And we're just going to do something different. And if it comes to the point where they take my YouTube channel down, that's fine. I'll go over and I'll start one on a different service. And if it costs me $20 a month to be able to have storage and bandwidth, well, then it costs me $20 a month. And I'll just remind everybody, hey, the YouTube channel is not free anymore. So could y'all pony up a $5 every once in a while just to keep the thing running? Yeah, you value it, great. Let's just do it. But there's only so far they can go with that before their business model implodes, by the way. But
one of the things it's funny. I've been talking to some people lately about, doing a YouTube channel. A lot of people have been asking me about it, and I'm thinking, okay, but here's what I thought the same thing. I thought, you know what? If I get started on a YouTube channel, and I think that's what it's like drugs, let's say you get started on a YouTube channel and you're making X amount of dollars per month and you get accustomed to that, they kind of got you over a barrel. Right. And so I thought exactly like you thought, if I do something YouTube, it will be, okay, this is here, but I'd prefer that you go to these other sites to watch me there. Ideally, I'd like to put up my own website and do it right through that. Right. But there are other things, BitChute, etc. But I'm like you, I do not want to start that's one of the things where I've hesitated for so long. Right. Is thinking about, I don't want to start a YouTube channel, build that YouTube channel. You've got money coming in, you're accustomed to whatever it is, right. And then because that can affect my decisions on what I'm going to cover. That can affect my decisions on what I'm going to name it, because I'm like, well, if I cover this, they're going to shut me down, so maybe I'll take this angle. Right. I don't want that kind of influence in my work. And right. I think that hopefully more and more people that come into this game will say, YouTube is not the avenue, and maybe we can get people to start going in other directions, because it's like, as you said, it's a matter of time. Right. It's a matter of time now before they shut it down. Yeah, and the other part of it is that the Googles and the YouTubes and the Facebooks of the world and Twitters, et cetera, are now wholly owned subsidiaries of the intelligence community. So when you use those, you're giving everything to the intelligence community. Every chat, every message that's sent, So I don't really want to be a part of that world, other than maybe to do I'll put it like this. I don't want to be tethered to that. I want to, like you said, to be able to use that to my advantage, but not only have that as the only option for getting my content out.
The best part about the phone call I got from Newsmax a couple of months ago was that it further diversified my income streams, right? So I have Patreon, and I've got money in markets, and I get paid by the Russian government through Strategic Culture Foundation, because they're a Moscow-based think tank. I'm sure the Russian government's giving them money in some way, around, shape, or form. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. They don't censor what I write. They don't care. They put it all up, typos and all, man. It's very obvious. I can show you there's nothing going on there. They're happy to host my work, and I've got gigs within Newsmax, and so I've got now 4 or 5 different forms of income, so that if they shut one off, and YouTube isn't one of them. So the YouTube channel does make some money because I will get donations here and there, but I don't count on it. And it's a nice supplemental little thing. It's $100 here or $20 there or whatever it is, and and you just go on, you just move on with your life. But more importantly, it's all my YouTube strategy, as flawed as all of my strategies are simply to just be there as supplemental material for the people who are engaged and want to stay engaged, and to give people the opportunity to see the unvarnished version of what they're getting, right? So, but they're reading that person. You see them live, and you see that this is unvarnished, and that drives organically. I think that drives a far higher engagement rate and usage rate and donation rate than it would otherwise. And if I had it, ads, and I had other stuff on the channel, people would be like, same thing on my site. I don't have any ads on my site either. So the business I've built has zero ad network support. It's all directly from people who value the work to the point that they're willing to give you money. And that's incredibly gratifying. And is it less money that I can make otherwise? Yeah, but it's not about the money. I mean, it's as long as my bills are paid, it ain't about the money. It's about doing the work that will inspire people to do the right thing going forward. ideas are bulletproof, right? Alan Moore, V for Vendetta. You can't
Hmm.
stop an idea whose time has come. And just like you can't stop a man who knows that, whose eyes are open, that he's, he is where he is, and he knows who he is. And we, and not just, I'm not, and my job, and all of our jobs, and that includes you and Lee and everybody that I interact with within this community. I was talking to Mike Shedlock a couple of weeks ago, and I know Mike feels exactly the same way, which is that we have to lead by
Hmm.
example everyone around us with the way we do our work, and that will inspire people to then pick it up and go to the next level. And Lee has citizen journalism school and populist TV and all that stuff, and he's, and that's how we do this. If you lead by example, and I learned this from the Mises Institute guys, I learned it from Lou Rockwell, I learned it from Joseph Ramondo, I learned it from Gary North, I learned it from those guys. You can all learn it from different people. I think Jimmy Dore's doing great work. Don't have to agree with him politically. Think he's doing great work. Think he's inspiring people, right? And I think that's what's important. I look at a guy like Tim Pool. I see Tim Pool is trying to inspire people. I see Joe Rogan. I think he's inspiring people and he's doing it right. And that's what's important. And that's what people are craving. We put a bow on this today, is that we spend all our times debunking narrative, right? And that's a complaint that I voiced earlier in the talk. But at the end of the day, we're inspiring people to go beyond that, and people are desperate for the next level of conversation. And that's all that really matters, because at the end of the day, if we inspire 100 people a week, 1,000 people a month, or 5,000 people a year, we're one person to start from scratch and become better than we are at doing this stuff.
Right.
Our work is valuable at that.
Well, and here's the other part, and I'm a firm believer in this. When people say, "Oh, you're wasting your time," I say two things. Number one, what else is there to do for me to do with my time but waste it? So that's fine. I'm
Yeah,
okay with
exactly.
that. I think the other part is that, and I've always said this. Look, if you say 100 things. Right. If you're trying to do advocacy, if you're trying to do activism, and you say 100 things to 100 people, two of them might take root. Two of them might, but you don't know which two. So you got to say all 100.
Right.
98 of them might say, "You're a jerk. I hate you. Go away." But two of them might say, "Hey, that makes sense." And one of them may start their own
Yeah.
newspaper. One of them may do something you don't know. So you have to do what you believe in. I think you can't listen to the naysayers. You can't listen to people who are saying you're wasting your time or you should be doing something else. If that's what you believe in, you do it. And then let the chips fall where they may. That's the other part I really believe in, that people like us simply do. A big part of it is, sure, do we want to change things, right? Yes, absolutely. But a big part of it is, and
Yeah.
I know with me, I can't speak for you, it's like the things that I'm looking at are so outrageous that it's like exploding out of me, that I've got to call them out. That I've got to point and
Yeah.
say, "Look, hey, everybody, look, the emperor has no clothes. Look over there. That's a fraud." And even if it works or it doesn't work, I can't resist the temptation or
Right.
the drive that I have to scream at the top of my lungs and say, "People, you're being had."
Right.
So part of it is what is being accomplished, or not being accomplished. God knows I can't tell you whether we're winning, losing, or I think we're winning. I think the desperation of the
I think
other
we're winning.
side shows that
I
we're winning. But the other part of it is there are people, I think, like
Absolutely.
Garland and Tom, who simply have it in us that we can't look at this crap and just walk around and pretend like everything's okay.
Now, Garland, you're absolutely right. And it's funny. I learned a lot from Gary North, Dr. Gary North, who is a very controversial figure at a certain level in this community. But he said he said things that, when he was writing at the top of his game, he said things to the next, when he knew that he was getting his career. He started writing about what we as the next generation were going to do. He's the one that said, start a blog, learn how to write, learn how to become an influencer in a particular, be an expert. If you're an expert in a subject that no one cares about, great. Write about it all the time, because when the time comes and people want to know, you're going to be the dude, right?
Hmm.
It doesn't matter if it's fixing washing machines. And, there's a guy on YouTube that always helps my wife out, who, fixing the dryer or this or that or whatever needs to be done, because I don't do that stuff. My wife does that stuff because that's her part of the job, right? My job is to make all the money and keep up on all this stuff. And her job to keep the house running. And she takes great and she takes some pleasure in doing that. But it's just, but that's what you get for having a wife that helped you build a house together, right? So it's a great thing. I don't have to fix the freaking dryer. It's fantastic. I think that's maybe the reason why, maybe one of the reasons why I love my wife as much as I do. But but he spent a long time trying to inspire men just like me when we were in our 30s. I mean, we're talking 15, 16 years ago now about writing stuff that tells us, oh, by the way, this is your calling, this is your job. Are you going to be able to do, what's the difference between these two things? He defined them for us. He reminded us about what stage of our life we're in, and when we're as we move through each of the stages of our lives, what becomes important to us. And so you have the opportunity, but you start now. And he's like, I tell my everybody, the young kids, start now. Learn how to write, learn how to do your thing, become a resource for everybody in your community. Because if you're a resource for a particular thing in your community, people will come to you. If you're an expert in a particular field, people will come to you. I can tell you that, Camille and I have always been that in our local community. But we've always tried to acquire new skills in order to be that, in order to be those people. And I think that's the example that you lead with as best you can. And it's part of the reason why it's Gold, Goats, and Guns. It's part of the reason why we do what we do. And this has all been, very consciously kind of designed and built with a particular ethos in mind, because it's not just about, talking about current events. It's about what those current events mean and how they can improve your life, and how you can then use that as a basis by which teach a man to fish as opposed to giving him a fish. Teach him how to fish, and teach somebody else, and teach the next person, and let them figure out how to do it, and go from there. And I can tell you that some of the best emails I've ever gotten were from people who said, your writing inspires me to want to be a better writer. I've heard that from journalists.
Let me ask you a question, Tom. I'm wondering how you feel. You know my position on the 2020 election,
Sure.
and just feeling like, I'm feeling as though the the Intel community has already, they've done a soft coup, and that they've basically pushed Trump aside, and they've grabbed the steering wheel completely for as far as foreign policy.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? And again, I'm not defending Trump, because a lot of the same old crap that Obama and Bush did, he's doing the same old stuff, but he just won't go quite far. He isn't neocon enough for them. But in me looking at it, saying I don't feel very hopeful about the 2020 election, and I think it's going to be a very, very frightening time, because I believe that it's going to be highly manipulated, maybe more so ever than before, that it's going to be more obvious than before, that they've just thrown in the towel. They don't care. And that I don't know how people are going to react to it. I think they've decided Trump ain't going to be there no matter how they have to do it. And I think we're at a time when it's really frightening how this thing could end up. But what are your thoughts on the 2020 election? Do you feel as strongly as I do that this thing is going to be a complete mess, and that the intelligence community and their proxies intend to take full control of it and just force some fraud through and call it an election in 2020?
That is my big fear. I don't know that they're going to be successful. Everything you just said, I agree with. I just don't think they're going to be successful. I think the people are awake enough that it's not going to happen. Is the vote fraud going to be off the charts? Yes, it will be. Was the vote fraud of the last two election cycles so bad that it's going to change some dynamics in this country, in certain states and certain counties? Yes, I do. I don't think Broward County and Miami-Dade are going to get away with the same level of fraud that they got away with the last two times. I don't think outside of the voter fraud in Broward and Dade County, for example, I don't think Florida is anywhere close to a blue state. I don't think Trump loses with blacks and Hispanics in Florida, even though, they tried to not rebuild Puerto Rico so that they can move them all into Orlando so that they could win Orlando, right? I mean, this is like freaking policy. That being said, the intelligence communities are not that good. The people that are running these organizations are pretty weak sauce. I think that, and I've made this point before in relation to Europe and Pelosi and Schumer and the rest of them. These people have all been winners when the board was tilted so far in their direction that they got to start with that, that if you're using a chess metaphor, for Christ's sake, they get to start with all their pieces, but you only get to start with, one bishop and a half and some pawns, and everything else is, and so they always look like winners because the board's tilted in their direction. And so they've never learned how to actually play chess, and they've never actually learned how to play the game properly. And the minute they get put into any kind of bad position, they immediately overreact in the worst imaginable way, and it just exposes them as incompetent. And I think that that's been the lesson of the last 3 years. And I look at the difference between what the crowd sizes for Trump and the crowd sizes for Warren. I look at the field. I think, they're going to bring Hillary Clinton. They're going to dust her off and bring her out. And I think Hillary's going to last in the race about as long as it takes for her not to get indicted, and for her to get enough money together that she and Bill can survive whatever the next lawsuit that's coming up against them. I think that's honestly why she's getting back in the race. And that Wall Street will give her a bunch of money because she's the only candidate on the left that they can or not on the left, but in the Democrats stable that they can count on, right? Because nobody in Wall Street will give any of these people money. Warren will not be the candidate.
Right.
And if Hillary comes back and she's a mess and she's incapable of holding the standard, look, like I said earlier, Mnuchin's still its treasury. If you don't think that Goldman and the rest of them won't just fall in behind Trump because Trump's been good to them, and that Trump won't go out of his way to court them and to keep the money out of the Democrats' hands, and you don't understand Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a strategic genius. He's tactically he's a mess. Strategically, the guy's pretty freaking solid. My problem with Trump is he's so impulsive that he's bad tactically.
Right.
Okay. So I think Trump has got that part of it locked down. I think there's going to be indictments. I think he beats the impeachment thing. I think the race now is whether or not Durham and Barr have enough, get enough on some of the senators, frankly, that could be corrupted against him to vote to remove him from office. I think there's about 15 people he's got to shore up.
Well, let me ask you this, though.
And he survives impeachment, then he moves on from there.
The question with Barr, because one of the things I've said, the idiot resistance, they were like, yay, Mueller, he's their guy. And I all along, I was like, Mueller is not the cure. Mueller's the disease. Yes, Mueller is just a guy who's there as a CIA mop-up man or FBI mop-up man. He's a joke. All he's going to do is reinforce the Russiagate hoax and reinforce some of the things that his handlers want him to reinforce. Let me add this. He had nothing to do with that Mueller report. Weissman did that report.
Yeah,
he didn't even know what the hell was in it. The poor guy looks like Joe Biden up there. He doesn't even know half the time. He didn't even know where he was.
Weissman wrote the report. So did Rosenstein.
Yep. Mueller was a tragic figure. But my point being, I kept telling them, you guys are fools if you think this guy's gonna bail you out, which there's nothing to bail out anyway. I say that to ask about this. Barr. It's clear if you do any kind of reasonable investigation, it's going to show that there was a massive intelligence operation illegal against Donald Trump, and it came out of Ukraine. Okay.
Yep.
But I don't trust Barr any more than I trust Mueller. So the question I have is, I'll put it like this. It wouldn't shock me if at the end of the day, Barr was just another CIA operative and he cleaned this thing for the intel community. I have some tiny hope that maybe he'll do a partially decent investigation, and at least, maybe Comey or McCabe or some of these other schmucks will be indicted enough to at least demonstrate that this whole Crossfire Hurricane thing was an illegal operation, and we can go from there. But I don't even, at this point, I don't even know if Barr's, one of them. What are your thoughts on that?
That I don't trust Barr as far as I can throw him. The only thing that gives me any hope whatsoever is that Trump and Barr seem to have an arrangement, right? And it goes back to the legal opinion that Barr wrote about obstruction of justice standard, which when he became Attorney General was used to then shut down the Mueller investigation, and we are where we are today. Correct? It was Bill Barr that did that. So now the question is, did Barr Where is Barr in this? Was that his opening salvo to get Trump's trust, so that now he can betray trust? He can betray Trump at the ladder later on, or is that deal still in place? Here's a couple of things, and the big thing that comes up about Bill Barr all the time is that he was the Bushy.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing: Papa Bush is dead. The rest of the Bushes don't matter.
Right.
The Bush legacy does not matter either. And this popped into my head one day when I was chatting with somebody about this, and the minute I said it was the minute I went, oh my God, that sounds so right. I think there comes a point. I said this about Donald Trump earlier, and I'll say it about certain other people. There comes a point where the lies are so big and the corruption so endemic that it triggers the disgust circuit in even the most venal people, like Donald Trump, like Bill Barr. Okay? That there comes a point where they go, okay, this is one step too fucking far. This is enough. Right?
Yeah.
We now just went from PG-13 to R. But that being said, that's what I think is going on here. And that's my default position, and I'm going to run with that position as a 70-30. That's my default position. 30% of me still thinks Barr's going to betray him.
Yeah.
And I think that if we'll know in the next few weeks or so, we'll know depending on what Mitch McConnell does relative to the trial. If Mitch McConnell rolls over and allows the Democrats to run the trial and to influence the trial in such a way that it's going to be a kangaroo court against Trump, then we know that Trump was unsuccessful in defending himself. But I think that that Giuliani and Durham and Barr and maybe Barr are all trying to gather up the evidence necessary to crush what's left of all of this and to crush specific people to ensure that they vote his way. And I know off the top of my head, I can count 5 who are going to be disloyal to him.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Romney, Collins, Murkowski, Graham, and Rubio.
Right.
Right? Without a doubt. Now
I think about Graham. Graham, South
matter?
Carolina, and in a way, I think Graham may be afraid to do that and go home.
Yeah, he may be. But I'll never trust Lindsey Graham to do the right thing.
Oh my God, yeah.
Never trust Lindsey Graham to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Because he can't pass the dead hooker live boy test.
Exactly.
So
exactly. Well, I think you're right. And when I look at what's going on now, I have the kind of same hope. And part of it is they went after Barr. They're the so-called whistleblower. The CIA operative. In the first paragraph, he went after Barr. And as soon as I looked at it, I'm like, well, it's obvious they're trying to stop the investigation. They're going after Barr. But to me, the key I want to see is what becomes of Mifsud. That's the part of it.
Absolutely.
Because, or Mifsud, I always get the F and the S backwards.
Yeah, it's Mifsud. Yeah.
So, but what becomes of that? Because when this first started, Lee can tell you, when it first started, the first person I zeroed in on was Mifsud. Because my point was, they're saying that the investigation started as a result of something that Mifsud said, and that Mifsud is a Russian operative. However, he's their guy. So
right.
They sent their guy at Trump's people and then said, our guy's a Russian operative, so we've got to start an investigation. I said, so if you go to Mifsud, as soon as you prove that he's their guy, then you start saying, who's been arguing this? And might I add one other thing? As soon as you prove that Mifsud is their guy, you can take the Mueller report apart. Because you have to then bring the people in that wrote it and say, wait a minute, in no time flat, in 0 time flat, I figured out that Mifsud is one of our guys. And you couldn't figure that out?
Right.
That you had 60 FBI agents, 60, and you couldn't figure out a guy who was on the payroll of Roman intelligence, on the payroll of MI6, a guy who was teaching courses for U.S. intelligence people, who was taking a picture with Boris Johnson, with people in the Obama administration. 60 FBI agents couldn't figure out that he's one of our guys.
And then he goes missing for 2 years. And then he goes missing for 2 years.
So you demonstrate that there is an intentional lie in the Mueller report. At that point, you now, to me, have to go after the people who wrote the Mueller report and say, we got to figure out why you people are intentionally lying. This thing just goes deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole.
Yep.
If you look at it.
I know it's crazy, and the fact that we're even like still discussing it in any term other than the way you just laid it out is reprehensible. And it just you just want to like walk into MSNBC one of these days and just take Rachel Maddow by the shoulders and shake her by the shoulders and go, "Yo, stop being you and wake the fuck up! Come on, you little bitch, stop it." You're doing tremendous damage to everybody. Donald Trump is not the devil. Get over yourself. I mean, you just want to do this. And you're like, and the fact that these people still have jobs. How is Jeff Zucker still in charge at CNN? Garland?
Right.
I mean, how is somebody so bad at his job still in charge? I mean, they eventually fired Jack Welch from NBC for Christ. I mean, at some point you have to fire the CEO. Like, your ratings are 110,000 people. Those are the 110,000 people we can say walked through the Atlanta airport yesterday. Okay? Because without the Atlanta airport, no one's watching CNN. Of course, it's all Pravda. I mean, even the Russians were never this bad.
No.
I mean, no. I've talked to people who lived in the former Soviet Union and are like, no, Pravda was never as bad as your media. We laugh at it today. Like, it's that bad. I'm like, and they call RT, propaganda. I'm like, yeah, of course it's propaganda. It's all propaganda. To what degree is what we're dealing with? And it's caveat emptor, dude. It's all propaganda. So do your own due diligence. If you don't have time for that and you're just going to check out, well, then you're not helping anything. You're part of the problem.
Exactly. Well, Tom, I got to get running.
Yep, so do I, darling. But this has been great. It's been great fun. I am glad you showed up. We should do this again sometime, except maybe with an adult beverage. I am going to try and make it up to Washington one of these days for the Fault Lines meetups. Just FYI, I'm just, it's like everything else, getting my my schedule cleared, my decks cleared, and all that stuff. But one of these days, I got to do one of those. We got to do this for real and in person. So it's been a great pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
All right, looking forward to it, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, man. You take care. Have a great day now.
All righty.
Bye-bye. Well, I hope you enjoyed this talk with a good friend, Garland Nixon. I enjoyed it. We had a great time. And I just want to remind everybody that you can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes and Spreaker and iHeartRadio and YouTube or wherever it is that you want to watch it. Also, you can follow my work over at tomluongo.me as well as over at both Strategic Culture and moneyandmarkets.com. And you can subscribe and support the work and this podcast directly through Patreon at patreon.com/Gold Goats and Guns, where you can also sign up for the Gold Goats and Guns investment newsletter. So, with that said, I think it's Thanksgiving week. I hope you all enjoyed it. Be well. Enjoy your holiday and your time with your families. Try not to carb coma too much, and keep your stick on the ice.